Hello, everybody, and welcome back to MazzaOnSports. Although it might as well be a Mazza on Mets show today, but MazzaOnSports. It's been a month, been a while since we've been on, but obviously there's a lot to talk about. We have to talk about the Mets and their offseason so far at this point, and the big story, the big news that came out today of Edwin Diaz leaving the Mets for the Los Angeles Dodgers. We'll also recap their offseason so far to this point. A lot of mixed opinions on it, a lot of change going on in Flushing Meadows and Queens. We'll talk about the Ravens and where they are right now where they were the last time we talked about them, and we'll talk a little bit about the Jets as well. But we'll mainly talk about the Mets and the Ravens. We'll get to the Ravens in a bit, but we got to talk about the Mets and Edwin Diaz, of course, leaving. We're going to recap their offseason so far to this point, and we're going to start from today, and we'll go back from there. But we'll start with Diaz. He today signed a 3-year deal, $69 million contract with the Los Angeles Dodgers as the rich get richer. The Dodgers didn't need Edwin Diaz at all, but the Dodgers also didn't need Shohei Ohtani, and they still signed him. And boy, that contract is paying off for them big time. $68 million in deferred money. He's only getting $2 million a year. The best player on the planet is only getting paid $2 million guaranteed. And that opens the door for the Dodgers to sign a lot of other players. And you've seen it. Yamamoto, Sasaki, Teoscar Hernandez, and now Tanner Scott, and now Edwin Diaz. So the rich get richer, and the Dodgers now have the best. The Dodgers now have the best player in baseball. They have one of the best overall guys in baseball, Mookie Betts, whether it's outfield or shortstop. They have the best first baseman in baseball, and Freddie Freeman. They have a bona fide ace on the rise in Yamamoto, who proved himself and carried the Dodgers, essentially pitching staff carried them to the playoffs, to the World Series, and the World Series win this past year. And now they have the best closer, maybe best relief pitcher overall in baseball, in Edwin Diaz. So, but for the Mets, it's a big one. This is a tough one to lose Edwin. According to Abby Mastraka of the New York Daily News, the Mets were shocked by this. They were shocked by Edwin leaving, and their offer to him was 3 years, $66 million with some deferred money. According to Anthony DeCuomo of MLB.com, the Mets beat writer there, the Mets gave him this offer, 3 years, $66 million. Edwin did not come back to the Mets after he was given the contract from the Dodgers. He did not come back to the Mets, and so I've seen some mixed opinions on it, obviously, from a lot of Met fans. Met fans started off a bit pissed off and frustrated at Cohen and Stearns because they saw the 3 year, $69 million and said, wait a minute, because there was a previous report earlier from a couple of weeks ago that said Edwin was looking at a 5-year deal, and the Mets didn't want to give him that, which I can understand. It's tough to give a 5-year contract to a relief pitcher, especially a guy in Diaz who's a one-inning guy. You need to have the lead, but the Mets obviously we're not going to give him a 5-year deal. So Met fans obviously were pissed off and a little frustrated that it was not a 5-year contract they signed. It was 3 years. But then when that report came out that the Mets offered him a 3-year, $66 million deal with some deferrals, and that Diaz didn't really give the Mets a chance to do the offer, to counter offer, and it looked like he just kind of left. Obviously, that sends a message to Met fans that Diaz didn't want to be here anymore, and he was, well, quote unquote, ring chasing. I've seen that a lot be thrown a lot now. He was ring chasing and going to the Dodgers. I've seen Kevin Durant comparisons now be thrown to him. I don't know about that, but it is what it is. Players obviously are going to look, it's free agency. Players are going to sign where they want to sign. This is free agency. We as fans can't be happy when the player, comes to the team. Comes to our team, and then, hey, yeah, look, I understand if you're angry. If you're a Met fan, look, you're obviously frustrated. I understand if you're a Met fan, you're obviously frustrated. But this is, it's free agency. It's a business. Sometimes you have to just, look, the Mets sign players. The Mets just signed Juan Soto last year. Look, it is what it is. But obviously, once that report came out before that Edwin went to the Dodgers and didn't give the Mets to counter offer, the tide kind of turned on that from fans. But it seems to be. But we can debate it all we want. We can debate what you can debate and argue for days. Who's to blame? Is Diaz a quote unquote a traitor? Did he go to the Dodgers and chase the rings and, wasn't, all that stuff? Or was it Cohen and Stearns' fault for not paying up and being cheap? Whatever it is, the bottom line is the Mets don't have a closer right now. Now we'll get to the other guy who looks to be at least in line to be the closer, although I don't think he will be, but we'll talk about him. We'll talk about that deal in a second. Like I said, we're going to start back for a minute. We're going to work our way back with the Mets with the offseason. Again, I've been away for a month, but I haven't done the show in a month, but the Mets just lost their best, not just their best reliever, but their best player, one of the best overall players on the team, and their best player on the market. Their best free agent on the market, I think. You can argue it's Pete Alonso, but I think it was Edwin Diaz. Edwin Diaz, to me, was their best free agent on the market, and now he's no longer on Met. So now they need to find another high-end reliever to go along with the guy we're going to talk about in a second. But this is a tough one. This is a real tough blow for the Mets. This is a tough one, and it just adds to more frustration for Met fans over the past 7 months. Ever since June 13th, June 14th of 2025, this has been a team, and this team has been very frustrating to watch and interesting and frustrating to watch operate. They had the best record in baseball, and then they just completely fell apart the last 3 or 4 months. No pitching from the starters. Bullpen wasn't getting big outs. A lot of coaching mishaps, and aside from Soto, Alonso, and Lindor, and a guy we'll talk about in a minute, Brandon Nimmo, not much really getting from the offense, and guys score as a scoring position, and that led to the Mets getting 83 or 84 wins and actually and missing the playoffs. But so a lot of frustration now has gone on with the Mets over the past 6 or 7 months, and it's certainly a far cry from where this team was a year ago. With all the goodwill they had, from the 2024 ride all the way to the NLCS, and then they signed Juan Soto, and then they had the best record in baseball from April to June 13th, June 12th. The goodwill that they had, that they stored up from this fan base, from this city, is well gone now. And this is now a team that needs to they need a break. They need a break to go their way right now. Everything that has gone on since mid-June, they need a break. They need something to go their way right now. And to lose your top closer, that's just, or one of your top pitchers, that is such a big, tough blow for them that they need to bounce back. And then you see a latest report from Mark Feinseth that the Mets are hesitant to give Alonso more than 3 years. I can understand. I get that. That's actually not really a big surprise report to me, because we've understood that the Mets are not going to go past 3 years of Pete Alonso. But there's also been reports around baseball, or from scouts and executives and agents, that said Alonso is not going to get 5-year deal. Teams don't really want to give him a 4-year deal. So we'll see what happens there. The Orioles are involved with him now. The Red Sox are involved with him. The Mets are involved. I do think with Edwin Diaz leaving in free agency today, it gives the Mets more of mandatoriness to get Pete Alonso back. They have to get Alonso back now. They really do. And if you have to give him 4 years, so be it. It might be an overpay for a 31-year-old, going to be 32 soon, kind of a one-dimensional slugging first baseman. He's a great player, Pete, really good player. I wouldn't say great, but he's a really good player. But doesn't really do much on defense, but he's a great slugger. Clubhouse loves him, obviously. If you have to give him 4 years, you might have to just give him the 4-year deal, because now you really have to sign Alonso back. If you lose this fan base is on a tipping point right now. People are upset. People are angry. They're kind of at a tipping point now. From everything that went on through the rest of the season, from June 14th or so onwards to the finish of the season, and now this offseason so far, and losing Edwin Diaz and trading away Brandon Nimmo, we'll talk about that. Fans are ticked. Fans are ticked. And you're going to have to do something to kind of just bring them back a bit, because fans are upset. They're not happy. And now your bullpen is back to being in a state of flux. Now your bullpen's back to being in a state of flux. Tyler Rogers is a free agent still. They didn't bring back Ryan Helsley. Diaz is now gone. AJ Minter, according to David Stern, said might not be ready for opening day, which is, of course, you'd understand that. I think he's coming off serious shoulder surgery. So, yeah, you understand that he's not going to be ready for opening day. They need to make some moves in this. They need a lot right now. And like I said, they need a break. They need something to go their way. They need a starter. They still need a starter or two. It's only December 9th, obviously. We're a long way from opening day, but spring training is going to be here soon before you know it. It's December already, so spring training is going to be here before you know it. It's not opening day, but spring training will be here before you know it. Teams, before you know it, will be packing up their bags and heading to Florida or Arizona for spring training. And, of course, then the World Baseball Classic. But the Mets need a break. They need something. They need a break right now. And they need to make a move. They need to make a move or two or three. They still need a frontline starter. They're going to need another bullpen guy, maybe a second bullpen guy. They still need a bat or two. They need a lot right now. And I don't know if they can fill all of that in one off season. I don't know if they can fill all of that in one off season. And they're going to need young guys like Carson Bench to step up because David Stearns loves him, and he's a David Stearns draft pick, and Stearns obviously sees a lot in him. So Bench is going to have to really step up next year if he's the opening day outfielder in left field or center field next year. But today's a tough one for the Mets and the Met fans because losing Edwin Diaz stinks overall. And we can debate all we want. Whose fault is it? Is it Stearns and Cohen's or is it Diaz? I don't know. Thing that came out today, Anthony Cuomo also said that Edwin Diaz left, or a couple of reasons he left. It was Mike Puma of the New York Post that said Diaz left for a couple of things. One, he got a good word from the Dodgers from his brother. His brother obviously played with the Dodgers and, put in a good word about him. Okay. And another reason for it was he left because Jeremy Hefner is no longer the Mets pitching coach. And, I guess I can understand, I get it. Look, he was his pitching coach for most of his time with the Mets, and now he's no longer there. So he's actually the Braves pitching coach now, along with Antoine Richardson. So I guess I can understand, you want to leave, you don't want to be you don't want to hear from a different voice in the Mets room. I guess I can understand, we'll see. But I guess I can understand, but those are apparently a couple of factors in Diaz leaving. Whatever it is, the bottom line is Edwin's now a Dodger, and he's got a good chance, of course, to win the World Series and win a three-peat with the Dodgers. And look, can you blame him? The Dodgers have just won back-to-back World Series championships. They've won 3 championships in 6 years. He wants a ring. I don't think the Mets right now are not close to a ring right now, unfortunately. And that sucks because they need to get good. This team needs to get good right now. So I don't think the Mets are getting Terry Skubal. I don't think they're going to get Terry Skubal. I mean, that would be one heck of a move, but they're going to have to. I don't know if they get Skubal without trading Nolan McLean. Put it that way. I see your projected rotation right now. They're not getting Skubal without Nolan McLean. They'd have to trade away Nolan McLean. My opinion on that. So I'm not sure about that. Tariq Skubal though would be a heck of a get, but I don't think they'd have to trade Nolan McLean to get Tariq Skubal, at least I think. But he'd be a good get, but they'd have to trade away Nolan McLean. I think Nolan McLean's untouchable. And he should be. He should be untouchable. But now this is a team. Hey, Kyle Tucker. Obviously Kyle Schwarber is no longer with the Mets. Apparently the Mets had serious interest in him. Of course they did. And the Mets did make him an offer. Actually, they offered more money in terms of AAV than the Phillies did. But I always felt he was going back to Philly. I always felt Schwarber was going to go back to Philadelphia. He's just made for that team. He's made for that city. He's made for that ballpark, especially. It's a long deal for the Phillies. He'll be 38 by the time, a 38-year-old DH guy. It's tough, obviously, but he's just made for that town. I think they could still get a couple of good years out of him. But that didn't surprise me. The Mets did make a run for Schwarber, but it just felt like he was always going to go back to the Phillies. With Diaz, obviously, it was a little bit different. But the Mets have a lot of work to do. They have a lot of work to do, which then, again, we go back to Devin Williams. Before this signing, before everything, before Diaz leaving, the Mets signed Devin Williams to a 3-year contract, $22 or $23 million. The plan was, I think, and I saw a report from this before the Mets signed Devin Williams, that the Mets were looking to sign both Devin and Diaz. So Devin would be the 8th inning guy, and Diaz, of course, would be the closer. Obviously, now that's not the case. So they signed Devin Williams, and I think they signed Devin Williams for both being a setup man and as the closer. It was a setup man just if they signed Diaz, closer if Diaz left. So right now he's penciled in as the closer. Obviously, he was a dominant closer with the Brewers. He really was. He was a dominant closer with the Brewers. One of the best closers in all of baseball, one of the best pitchers in all of baseball with Milwaukee. And, of course, David Stearns was there and helped, and he developed there. He oversaw him there. He overwatched him. I get it. So the Mets are hoping that 2024 is an aberration, or 2025 was an aberration with the Yankees, because he struggled with the Yankees as the closer. He did a lot better as a setup man for the Yankees. Actually pitched pretty well in the postseason for them against Boston and Toronto. But if he's going to be the closer, you have to hope that 2025 was an aberration. There's a lot of people that think so. So of course, the Mets, it looks like the Mets believe that. So we'll see. I like the signing of Devin Williams. I don't love the signing of Devin Williams. And the signing of Devin Williams now, has to work out, especially with no Edwin Diaz there. With no Diaz, that signing now has to work. He has to pitch better than he did for the majority of last year, at least as the closer. But that's, of course, if he's still even the closer. I don't know. I'm not confident in that Devin is still penciled in as the closer for next season. I'm sure David Stearns will go on Mets Hot Stove tonight on SNY and say that they're comfortable with him as the closer. We think he's the closer, blah, blah, blah. But I'm sure but this team just a day or so ago, report came out, they were interested in Trevor McGill, Trevor McGill, Tyler McGill's brother, the closer in Milwaukee. So that tells me that they're not, and that was, of course, before Diaz signed, after Devin Williams signed. So that tells me they're still looking at a high-end reliever to at least be the closer, and for Devin to still be the setup guy. So, but I still think there is that scenario where Devin Williams is the closer. So we'll see what happens there. You better hope his changeup is the New York Brewers. Yeah, right? You better hope his pitching is better than it was a year ago. You better hope that changeup, the airbender, is back to the way it was before in Milwaukee, that they can fix it up, that he can get back to his Milwaukee form. Because if he's at least most Yankee Devin Williams, because again, he was pretty good as a setup guy and as a middle relief guy with the Yankees, but you better hope he's Milwaukee Devin Williams, because if he's not, boy, that's going to look bad for David Stearns. And again, they need that signing to work out now with Edwin Diaz no longer there. Which brings us to before Brandon Nimmo's trade. The Mets traded Brandon Nimmo to the Toronto Blue Jays for Marcus Semien. And that was all contract for contract. That was a pure contract, get rid of it, move. And it was to hopefully improve second base while trying to get more versatile in the outfield. This one was tough too, because Brandon has been with the team since 2016. When he was a rookie, he is beloved with Met fans. They love his positivity. They love his smile. They love his attitude. He's a hard worker. He's just a genuinely good guy overall in general. Busted his butt off to become a starter, became a darn good player for the Mets for a decade, one of the Mets' highest players overall in wins above replacement. You could pat him leadoff. At his best, in my opinion, was when he was a leadoff guy, getting on base and working the counts. But of course, as he got a little bit older and as he started focused more on power, the walks kind of went away, but they were replaced by him hitting for power and hitting up 20 plus 25 home runs. But wherever you need a Nimmo, obviously he was a versatile player for the Mets, and that was a tough blow. But of course, the business is the business. He had a high 8-year contract that Billy Epler signed. I think David Stearns obviously would not have signed that contract. He's been having problems with his both plantar fasciitis. His defense was down at left field last year. He has had inconsistencies over the last couple of years at the plate. 2024 especially was not a good year for him. 2025, a good year for Nimmo, of course. A good year for Nimmo, I would say. But there were still moments of inconsistencies with him. And they went out and go get Marcus Semien. Now, Marcus Semien obviously has come off a very down year on offense, but defensively, he was still very good. He's a leader and a big clubhouse guy that you love to have. So in your locker room, but he's still an overall, he's still historically speaking a good hitter. You're just hoping that, again, last year was an aberration. Last year was a tough year due to injuries. His numbers did get better from May 30th or June 1st onwards last year. You're just hoping that he can at least get back into a form. I still think he can be a good hitter. It's tough. Obviously, he's 35, 36 years old, but I still think he can be a decent hitter for the Mets and at least give you something from second base, because the Mets have had trouble right now at second base, from Jeff McNeil's inconsistencies and struggles to Luisano Acuna not taking a step up. They really need something at second base right about now. And I do think Marcus Semien can at least be can at least be okay for Semien. And there was an interesting stat that said if he was at Citi Field over the last couple of years, he would have had more homers. Obviously, Globe Life Field is a ginormous ballpark, but again, hopefully that's the case. I think so too. I think he'll be okay at Citi Field, but they're really not getting him. The Mets' main plan for him was defense and leadership. I think they hope his offense can be good. I think his offense can be better than some people think, but his defense and leadership is where the Mets, I think, are looking for. But we'll see with Semien. I like Semien, good player, good locker room guy. With Brandon Nimmo, again, it's a tough one. This is another tough blow. 10-year guy, been with the team for a long time. I think he was a guy that when he signed with the Mets, that extension a few years ago, there was a lot. He talked about retiring as a Met, getting his number retired, number 9 in the rafters. And now I don't know if that's going to be the case anymore, where he gets his number retired, number 9. He'll certainly be in the Mets Hall of Fame one day, but getting his number retired in the rafters, I'm not sure about that now. But it's a tough one. This is a guy who was drafted, developed by the Mets, worked his butt off, became a good player. But unfortunately, it just seemed like a bad contract, him aging, defense was getting a little worse. And like I said, contract kind of worked against him. So they shifted the Mets and Blue Jays shifted contracts. The Blue Jays got rid of the Semien's contract. The Mets got rid of Nimmo's contract. And so it is. But this has been one eventful offseason for the Mets so far, and it's only December 9th, and Pete Alonso is still available in the market. Once again, Brandon Nimmo is traded to Toronto for Marcus Semien. They then signed Devin Williams, and now today they lose Edwin Diaz in free agency to the Los Angeles Dodgers, who did not need Edwin Diaz, but, so was the Dodgers. The Dodgers don't care. And, of course, this will also bring about next year or 2027 and the lockout, so on and so forth. We're not there yet, obviously, but, of course, the Dodgers signing Edwin Diaz is certainly not going to help the case for the lockout coming in 2027. Obviously, nobody wants the lockout. No fan obviously wants the lockout. We all want baseball in 2027. But when you see the best relief pitcher in baseball going to the now 2-time defending World Series champions, who already have the best player in baseball, one of the best all-around players in baseball, and Mookie Betts, and then the best first baseman in baseball, and a rising ace in Yamamoto. Yeah, it definitely makes things a little harder for a lot of other teams. And look, I'm a Mets fan. Obviously, the Mets have money; they can pay. Obviously, the Mets aren't really the problem here in terms of, we're not one to talk and complain about losing players to money wise, obviously. But for a lot of other teams, and of course, parity in baseball, It's a thing. And that's going to be a topic of discussion after the season, after 2026 is over. But the rich get richer. Like I said, they're benefiting a lot from that Shohei Ohtani deferred money. He's only making $2 million a year, which is incredible for the best player in baseball. But for the Mets, the Dodgers get richer. They get better. They work to their credit. Look, to their credit, the Dodgers, they get better. They continue to get better. And they're going to continue to get better this offseason because you don't think they all want to win a third World Series in a row and make history, become the first team since the 98, 99, 2000 Yankees to win a three-peat? Of course. They want a three-peat. They want to win their fourth World Series in 7 years or 6 years, 7 years. That's what they're going for. I give them credit for that. I give them a ton of credit. So that's just my opinion on that. But for the Mets, they got a lot of work to do. And David Stearns has his work cut out for him because the goodwill that the Mets and Stearns and Cohen have worked up over the last, from June 2024 to early June 2025, is gone. It's gone. People are ticked. They're frustrated. And this is now a team that has a lot of work to do. There's no goodwill anymore. There's no honeymoon period. I saw a friend of mine mention that on Twitter. The honeymoon's over. Yeah, the honeymoon period is over. There is no honeymoon anymore. It's gone. This team now, it's time to get serious for the Mets. They need to get better. They need to get better, and it's time for them to think about some of these players they have in free agency. I mean, some of these players they have in the minors, Acuna, Mauricio, all of them. Would I trade Lindor? No, I wouldn't. I think Lindor is one of those stable guys that needs to be on this team for at least the long run. I know he's getting older. But I would not trade Francisco Lindor. No, I would not. I love him. But maybe that's a personal bias. I love him, but he's a guy that you want to stable on the team. He's a leader on the team, contrary to what I've seen from recent reports about a confrontation he had with Jeff McNeil or so on. I don't know how serious the confrontation was. I mean, they apparently didn't throw any punches or anything. It looked like they were just kind of arguing with each other after the game. And look, they had lost 7 in a row by that point. Yeah, there's going to be some frustrations. I don't buy the whole thing that him and Soto don't get along. I think that was a little kind of taken out of context. I think they get along fine. But Lindor, again, Lindor is a prime example of how much things have changed, right? A year ago, Lindor was hailed as the leader of the team, name him captain, all that stuff, carried the team to the NLCS. And now a year later, it's, what's going on over there? I think Lindor is great. I think Lindor is still a great player. I think last season, hopefully, was a bit of an aberration on his defensive side. I think next year he'll be much better on defense because he's going to watch the film he had this year on defense, and he knows that wasn't good enough on defense. His hitting is still going to be fine. I think his defense will be fine. I think he'll be fine in the locker room and the clubhouse. And again, you need stability there. He needs stability in the constant there. I would not trade Francisco Lindor. I wouldn't. That's just my opinion. I wouldn't trade him. I think, and plus, he's the least of the Mets' issues, I think. He's the least of the Mets' issues. The least of their issues. The Mets have a lot more problems aside from Francisco Lindor. They have a lot more problems. Lindor is not one of them. I wouldn't trade him. But they do need to evaluate what they have in the minors, whether it was Acuna, Mauricio, who's both of them are hitting right now in the winter ball. Both of them are hitting the winter ball, but that's not a surprise. They always hit in winter ball. Stearns said at the beginning of the winter meetings that Brett Beatty is going to play a major part of third base. I definitely agree with that. I understand that. Beatty had a good year, played good defense. I definitely think he's the front runner to be the starting third baseman next year. Jet Williams, like I mentioned, Carson Bench. Carson Bench looks like is going to be the starting outfielder, whether either it's on opening day or at least sometime after opening day. But they have all these, Brandon Sproat, Jonah Tong. Like I said, Noah McLean seems to be the only one that's untouchable, which definitely he should be. But Sproat, Tong, what do you see in those guys in the future? Could you trade one of them? I wouldn't trade both of them, Sproat or Tong, but could you trade one of them? Christian Scott's going to come back next year. What's his role? Do you see him as a starter on the team, or do you maybe put him out there and trade off? I saw, you mentioned David Peterson, Tetsuya. You mentioned David Peterson. David Peterson, I saw in a report today, was being fielded by the Mets in trade offers. Their Mets are asking for a lot, apparently. So it looks like that seems to be less likely, but Peterson is a guy that is going to have to be paid soon. And, you know, it's going to be interesting to see what kind of contract he's looking for. I like Peterson. I don't love Peterson. I thought last year was a little interesting how good he was at the beginning, and then he just fell apart in August, September. You can argue the innings and such, but he's also not a guy who should be at the top of your rotation. Pearson's not a guy who should be at the top of your rotation. He should be in the guy at least the three at best, 4 or 5. He's not a top of the rotation guy, David Peterson. But it's interesting. I thought that was interesting. The Mets are looking at offers for him. I thought that was interesting. Because again, he's got 1 year left after this. He's a free agent after this season, and you're gonna have to pay him. So I don't know. So that's going to be interesting to watch at Pearson's trade market. He's a guy who, if the Mets are, let's say, are not good next season and he's pitching well, he'll be traded at the trade deadline. But we'll see what happens with Peterson. I'm interested to see if he is on this. I think he'll still be in the starting rotation. But if the Mets get an offer that they like, he's probably going to get traded too. Because again, he's a free agent at the end of the season. But having said that, again, there's a lot of minor league prospects and players that the Mets have to make decisions on. They got to make decisions on them. So, and it's time for the Mets to really buckle down here and buckle up here and start to put this team together. It's December 9th. Obviously, there's a long way to go, of course, but this was a tough day for the Mets. This is a tough day. Losing Edwin Diaz, especially to the Dodgers, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. And if Diaz left because he wanted to leave, you know, and he didn't even give you a chance to counteroffer, boy, that's even more tougher. That's even more tougher. You know, and again, I don't blame I'm not going to point the fingers and blame Stearns or Cohen or to say Edwin Diaz is a traitor and whatever. You know, I'm not going to play that game. All I'm going to say is it's a tough, tough day. And the Mets need to bounce back because they need something to go their way. They need a break because they haven't had one over the last 7 months. They haven't had one over the last 6 or 7 months. They haven't had a break since Kodai Senga hurt his hamstring that day. They have not had a break. They have been on. They won that game, but since Kodai hurt his hamstring on that play, it has been a complete mess ever since. They need a break in the worst. They need a break right now. And I'll tell you, you know what could really help? You re-sign Pete Alonso. That could at least get the fans at least a little bit back on your side. Well, maybe not a little bit, but a lot. It gets the fans a lot back on your side. It gets confidence back on your side. Right now, re-signing Pete Alonso, regardless of how many years or money it is, that might be the best thing for the Mets to do right now, just to get some confidence back in there, back in yourself, and also in the fan base. Because like I said, this is a fan base that's frustrated right now. They're very frustrated. So, speaking of frustrated fans, the Baltimore Ravens. Last we spoke and last we checked. The Ravens had just got back Lamar Jackson. They had just beaten the Miami Dolphins. And looked like things were going to be okay, right? They beat the Bears. They upset the Bears. Lamar came back. They won that game against Miami. And then they racked up a couple more in a row. They beat Minnesota. They beat Cleveland. They beat the Jets. All good, right? They were 6-5, but you saw the offense wasn't playing well. The offense struggled a lot in those games, even against bad teams. Like the Browns have a great defense, but they're not a good team. And the offense really struggled that day. Minnesota, not a great team. They have a good defense, but the offense really struggled that day. And against the Jets, I was there for that game. Me and my family went up to Baltimore. They're Jet fans. Or my dad and my brother are Jet fans. We went up there to Baltimore, had a great time. Love the city. Love the stadium, love the arena, love the atmosphere that Ravens fans in Baltimore brings every Sunday to Ravens games. It's one of the best atmospheres in all of the NFL. But we all went, had a great time, and you know, we watched that game, And again, Ravens won, but that wasn't an impressive showing. That was not an impressive showing by the Ravens offense. That was not an impressive showing. So they went through 4 straight weeks where they won, but wasn't with Lamar back 5 in a row overall because they won the game in Chicago with Tyler Huntley at quarterback. But you knew something was off. And then Thanksgiving came along. The return of Joe Burrow with the Bengals, and the Ravens offense put on an absolutely disgusting performance. 5 turnovers, 4 fumbles, an interception. It was a very, very disgusting performance. Very disgusting performance. And they lost that game to the Bengals to go to 6-6. And that was a very disheartening loss. Like I said, it was just as bad of an offensive showing as they've had maybe in the whole Lamar era. Because I don't think, maybe not since either the wild card loss of the Chargers or the divisional loss of the Titans. I think that was the last time I saw the Ravens offense under Lamar look that bad on Thanksgiving against the Bengals. It was just awful and atrocious. And Lamar again had a bad day for the 4th straight game, or for the 5th straight game, not a particularly strong day, or for the 4th straight, because the second half against Miami, he was pretty good. So for the 4th straight game, just a really bad performance. And offensive line, bad performance. Defense gave up too many big plays. The defense held their own in the red zone. To credit them, the defense actually played well against Cincinnati, even though Burrow had a good game. They held their own and kept the Ravens in it, but it was just the offense that had 5 turnovers. You're not going to win when you fumble the ball 4 times and have 5 turnovers on the day. But that was a disheartening loss after they won 5 in a row to get back into things. And they were facing a Bengals team that, they were facing a Bengals team that had historically one of the worst defenses we'd ever seen. And the Ravens offense looked like that against one of the worst defenses we've ever seen. The Bengals offense will score, right? They'll score. They score with Burrow. They score with Flacco. But that defense stinks. And for the offense to play like they did against that defense, a defense that, by the way, the Jets look great against, that's frustrating. That's a bummer. So then they had 10 days to prepare for the Pittsburgh Steelers. In the biggest game of the season so far to this point, they have 4 games left. At home, both 6-6, division on the line, division lead on the line, and they came out very flat in the first half. Just a wild game to be this overall. And look, we'll get to the penalties, we'll get to the referees, and we'll get to the controversies and et cetera. But let's not get it twisted. The Ravens came out in a must-win game against the Steelers, and they came out flat, both on defense, because Rodgers was throwing deep on them like he was prime Packer Aaron Rodgers, and the offense, again, Lamar struggled, struggling on the 2 guards, Voorhees and Falale struggling again, Lamar missing throws, guys dropping passes. Running game was good overall. They had over 200 yards of rushing, actually. And when you have over 200 yards as a team of rushing, you should win the game. But defensively, again, they gave up too many big plays in the passing game. And before you know it, before the Ravens took the field in their last drive of the first half, they were down 17-3. They were down 17-3 to begin the game. That is not how you should start at home against your division rival. And again, let's not get it twisted. Before we talk about the referees and everything like that, the Ravens came off to a slow start, and you can't do that. Not against your division rival, not against your biggest division rival at home with the division lead on the line. You can't come out like that. You can't. And the Ravens did again. And they were down 17-3. The Ravens then score before the half on a Lamar rushing touchdown. This is when Lamar started to play better. If there's any positive to come out of this game, is that from the end of that first drive and the end of that last drive in the first half to the rest of the game in the second half, Lamar played pretty darn well. He actually looked like himself. He played pretty darn well in that, from the end of the first half into the second half. But for the majority of the first half, he really struggled. But from that point on, from the end of the first half into the second half, he looked like himself. So if there's anything positive to take out, it's that. But even still, you can't be down 17-3 at home against the Steelers. But they score, but before the half, but they score, and they're down 17-10, and then more mistakes was going on, right? They couldn't get the big play, the winning play, what we've been craving with the Ravens for the last 8 years. They couldn't get the winning play, And look, I thought the Isaiah Likely play was a touchdown. I thought it was a touchdown, but at the same time, you do have to hold on to the ball all the way into the end zone. Sometimes if you do drop that ball in a bang play like that, they're going to probably rule it incomplete. You just have to hold on to it. And again, second week in a row, because remember, against the Bengals, Likely is running down the field, and you think he's got a touchdown, and he fumbles in the end zone for a touchback. Like again, it's just the little things. It's the little things. I think, in my honest opinion, that was a touchdown to Likely, but I can see why the referees overturned it. But also, again, we don't really know what a catch is in the NFL anymore. And has anybody figured out what a catch is truly in the NFL is? I don't know. There was the play, obviously, with the tip ball, and Buchanan looked like he had the interception, but Rodgers kind of came down on it with the ball. He got the ball. His knee hit it, so that would have been a sack. Again, kind of a weird play. They ruled it a sack, but also kind of a weird play to begin with. There was the really bad Travis Jones penalty that would have just given the Steelers a field goal, but it results in a touchdown. Fourth down, gave him a first down. Like, that was such a bad mistake and a bad penalty by Travis Jones. Just overall, again, an ugly game. There was a bad drop by Rashad Bateman late in the game. And then to top it all off, the Ravens have a really bad 2-minute drive. A really bad 2-minute drive to end the game. Just looked out of sync, slow. The clock was going. Again, whatever that was for, was that Harbaugh, was that Lamar? I don't know, but it just looked like things were out of sync. And I think that's the best thing as the Ravens lose this game 27-22 to Pittsburgh. They're now 6-7, and the Steelers are 7-6 with a game and a half up on them with the win and with a game up on them and then the win over them. So they're a game and a half now up on them. And they face again the finale. They face again in the season finale coming up. But the bad thing about this loss is that you get the Patriots and the Packers coming up. The Ravens now have to go to Cincinnati this week at Cincinnati, which, look, they could beat Cincinnati. They can beat Cincinnati. Just don't turn the ball over like that. Just don't turn the ball over like that. The way you did against them on Thanksgiving. They can beat the Bengals. I saw the Bengals defense against Josh Allen this Sunday. They were horrible. Against Josh Allen, the defense was terrible. So look, you should be able to score a ton of points on the Bengals defense and win the game. But after that, they got the Patriots and the Packers coming up. I don't think they can beat the Patriots and the Packers right now. I don't think they can. I don't think that, could they beat them? Could they beat them? Sure, but I don't think they will. What gives me any confidence right now that they could beat the Packers or the Patriots right now? What gives me any confidence? And with the way the offensive line, especially Voorhees and Flally are playing right now, what makes me think that they're going to block Micah Parsons and Rashad Gary and that Packer pass rush? I don't have any high confidence they're going to be able to. I think the game on Sunday might have been the Ravens season. And I think the biggest thing about them is that, once again, they were out of sync, not playing as a team, didn't play. I don't think the Ravens have played a complete game really all season. I think maybe the one or two truly complete games they played this year was Chicago with Tyler Huntley at quarterback and the Dolphins. But even then, they looked better in the second half. So really the only true complete game I could say they really played was Chicago. Because from quarter one to quarter four, they looked good as a team. They were balanced on offense, and defensively, they were really good. That might have been the one game where they really played a complete game. Other than that, they have not played a complete game. It's either been the offense was good, defense wasn't, or defense has been good, offense hasn't. Or you get Sunday where against Pittsburgh, where the defense really isn't good for the whole game, or at least the majority of the game, and the offense was asleep for the first part of it, and then they woke up a bit in the second part, but didn't make the plays to win the game, right? they didn't make the big plays. So, but this is that's the whole story of the Ravens season and why they're 6-7 and why they're now on the outside looking in the playoff picture now. Although the wild card has definitely opened up for them, because with the Indianapolis Colts unfortunately losing Daniel Jones, and that's a tough injury to see, really tough blow for them, that he tears his Achilles and he's out for the year. And now they're bringing back Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers, 44-year-old Phillip Rivers, I wasn't taking a snap in the NFL in 3 or 4 years, is now back. And it looks like he's going to play this Sunday against the Seahawks at Seattle. And I wish him luck. I wish him luck. I like Rivers, but I wish him luck. Your first game in 4 years is going to be at Seattle against that Seahawks defense. I wish him luck. I really do. He's a tough customer, though, Phillip Rivers. He's one of the toughest quarterbacks to ever play the game. So, but the Colts need him in the worst way possible. But that wild card is now open up for him. But unfortunately, you've already lost to Kansas City. And even then, Kansas City is really reeling right now. And you lost to Houston. You've lost to Houston. They're red hot right now. So it looks like Houston is primed to take that last wild card spot if Indy continues to struggle, and if this Rivers experiment doesn't work out. So, but the wild card now has opened up for them, but it's still the best bet in the division. And really for the Ravens, they have to win out. Really, that's it. They have to beat Cincinnati, beat the Patriots and the Packers, and then beat the Steelers in the finale. That's really the best bet to make the playoffs. You got to win out. But can you trust the Ravens right now to beat the Patriots and the Packers? I don't know. I think they'll beat Cincinnati this Sunday because I just don't think they'll turn the ball over 5 times again. But can they beat the Patriots and the Packers? And the Packers? It's not or, it's and. Can they beat them both? I don't think so. Even though they got New England at home, I don't think they'll beat New England. And I don't think they're going to go to Lambeau and beat the Packers. I don't think that offensive line could stop Micah Parsons and Rashad Gary and those guys. This is tough. And it's really a frustrating year. And it's, again, a year where they just haven't put it together. And it's just, again, almost similar to the Mets, right? They came in with high expectations, a very talented roster. It seemed like everything was in place for them to have a big year and make a run at a championship. And just like the Mets, nothing has been able to come together, right? Just haven't been able to come together. They haven't played a complete game, or have stretches where they're playing like a complete team, right? The first part, it was their offense was great, defense wasn't. Then the next part, the offense was bad, defense wasn't, and now, and that's kind of how it was in Pittsburgh. Defense was struggle and the offense was struggle. And then the offense picked it up a bit. Defense kind of, defense again, still gave up some big plays. They had that horrible breakdown on third down. Horrible breakdown on the check down to, I think it was Jaylen Warren. He took it all the way for a touchdown on the flat. Just a horrible defensive breakdown, just unacceptable. And Zach Orr brought in an all-out blitz. And a Hall of Fame quarterback Aaron Rodgers is gonna realize it and see it and go, okay, and just throw it to the easy throw, and he gets a big gain, or in this case, a touchdown. So just haven't been able to put it together and complete as a team. And I don't know what the future holds for the Ravens. We're seeing the offseason the Mets are having. I don't know what lies for the Ravens in the offseason. I don't know. If the Ravens don't make the playoffs, I mean, there's going to be some changes made. And I could see them making a change of coach, even though, look, I love John Harbaugh. I think he's been great for this team for 18 years or so. But, in a year full of high expectations and win the Super Bowl or bust, and especially in a year where Kansas City is struggling, this is tough. And, and Harbaugh might be the odd man out this time. Before it was Greg Roman, before it was Greg Roman, Hollywood Brown, Earl Thomas, those guys those guys have been the scapegoats over the past several years. But it looks like Harbaugh might be the next one to be fired or so, or whatever. He might have to he's going to have to take the fall here. And I think that's a tough one to watch, but it's going to be a tough one. Will he be fired? I don't know. But someone's going to have to take the fall, and it might be Harbaugh. It might be him. And this team's going to look very different next year. It's going to look very different. Unless this team goes on a miracle run the table, and just get hot and go to the Super Bowl, this team is going to look drastically different next year. I'm not saying they're going to make changes to quarterbacks. No, that'd be stupid. But in terms of personnel and players and other guys around their offense and defense, this team could look a lot different next year. And especially if they change the coaching staff, could look a lot different. That's another thing. If Harbaugh's fired, what happens to Todd Monken and Zachary Orr? I definitely think Zachary Orr is not going to be back. I think the Ravens are not happy with Zachary Orr. And overall, look, you can't really be happy with him. He's had an inconsistent defense his last 2 years. His first 2 years. Last year started off terrible, but then they turned it around from week 10 or so and had one of the best defenses in football going into the playoffs. Overall they were good in the playoffs against both Pittsburgh and Buffalo. And now this year you get a defense that struggled for the first part of the season. They picked it up and turned it around. Granted against lesser opponents and lesser offenses like JJ McCarthy and Tyrod Taylor. No offense to him, he's doing the best he can. Tyrod over there with the Jets, but still they got no receivers over there. They got no receivers over there aside from Garrett Wilson. Dylan Gabriel and rookie Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders against Cleveland. So again, not very strong quarterback play. And then he faces Aaron Rodgers and Joe Burrow, an elite quarterback, and Burrow in his prime and a future Hall of Famer in Rodgers. And they play well against him. So, at least their personal game was good. Because I did think the defense against Cincinnati held their own and was able to keep Cincinnati in the end zone for a lot of the game. But it was really their offense turning the ball over 5 times. But I don't know if Zach Orr is back next year. I don't think the Ravens are happy with him with the way this defense has performed. Have been inconsistent with him over the last 2 years. And Todd Monken, look, he's been great. I don't think Todd Monken's the problem. I think he's been great in his 3 years now. He's been the offensive coordinator. And especially with Lamar, obviously his last 2 or 3 years, he had some inconsistencies. He had struggled since he had some inconsistencies and had even some struggles in the 3 years or 2 to 3 years since he won the MVP in 2019 and 2021, 2022. He definitely has some struggles, and he was injured and missed the rest of those seasons. Todd Monken comes in and Lamar puts up his 2 best seasons to date, wins MVP in 2023, and then 2024 he has his best season ever and doesn't win MVP. But he was still incredible last year. So Monken's done a really good job this year. Certainly this year could have been a lot better for him, but I don't think he's the problem. Monken, I would like to see him back, but if Harbaugh's fired, I could see both coordinators gone. Or if but even if Harbaugh isn't fired, I could certainly see one of the other coordinators gone. I could certainly see at least one coordinator fired, and that probably would be Zach Orr. But this has been, again, a frustrating, difficult season where just nothing is going right, and they're just not a team that they're once again showing who they are, which is not a championship team. They have all the talent, all the, star power that should win a Super Bowl. But right now, what have they shown you over the last 8 years that tells you that they can go to a Super Bowl and win it all? Not much. They win a lot in the regular season. They set a lot of records, all that stuff. But in big games and big moments, that's why I think for the most part, this is a player issue. I think for the most part, it's the players. I just don't think this is a roster. I just don't think this is a team and a group of players that can actually win them a title. We've seen too many big games over the last 8 years where they're not able to come through and win the game or win it in winning time. When you got to win and you got to have that moment, you got to win. Even on the last play of the game on Sunday. Even the last play of the game on Sunday. Even the last play of the game on Sunday, the 4th down. Well, the drive before that on 4th down. It's 4th down. Lamar is late. DeAndre Hopkins is wide open in the back of the end zone. Lamar is late getting the ball to him. And then you even have Andrews is, the ball comes out a little bit later than it should. And Andrews actually reaches out because he thinks the ball is coming to him and he tips the ball out, but it's like a combination, right? They're no chemistry, not together. Lamar sees Lamar sees Hopkins, but he's late getting it to him. He's late getting to him, and Andrews, thinking the ball's coming to him. Hopkins is running over here in the back of the end zone. Andrews is coming over here. Lamar, he thinks the ball's coming to him. He reaches out. Like, again, just a combination of all that tells you just shows you the kind of team it is. Like, they just haven't been able in 8 years to make the winning play. The winning play. They have been able to have the winning play and have the winning moment in 8 years. I just think this is a group of guys who are just not a championship level team. They just haven't proven that they can win in the big moments. It's just who they are. They have shown you who they are for 8 years. And it's everybody. So do I think a change of head coach will all of a sudden flip a switch? That's the thing. I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think changing a coach will flip the switch, and then all of a sudden they'll win the Super Bowl. Plus, even if they were to get a rookie head coach, rookie head coaches usually don't win Super Bowls. They don't. Not usually. They actually don't. So regardless of how the season ends for the Ravens, and they got 4 games left to right the ship, there's going to be some interesting decisions made in Owings Mills over the spring and the summer. There's going to be some interesting things there's going to be some interesting things in Owings Mills that they're going to have to think about. And you still got to give Lamar an extension. Lamar Jackson came into the season with no extension. Lamar came into the season with no extension done, which was very surprising to me. You still have to give him an extension. They gave Mark Andrews an extension last week, which I thought was smart. Isaiah Likely just hasn't taken the steps necessary to show he's the number 1 tight end on the roster. He did get his first touchdown of the season finally on Sunday, but he really hasn't shown you much all season long that he should be the number 1 tight end going forward. And Andrews is still Mark Andrews, and he's still a reliable target for Lamar Jackson, so you give him an extension. It's not a bad contract. I saw a lot of Ravens fans complaining about it. It's not a bad contract. You still, the Ravens, it's still a good, friendly contract for the Ravens. I think it's a decent contract, so I think they'll be fine there. I don't think there's anything to worry about, on that end. But this is a team that just hasn't been able to win in the big moments. And again, on Sunday, in a must-have game, must-win game, they didn't come through. They didn't win because of mistakes. Just mistakes. We can talk about the referees all we want, but there were too many mistakes. And they got 4 games to right the ship. So we'll see what happens starting this Sunday against the Bengals. I think they beat the Bengals on Sunday. I'll be back with a show on Friday, and we'll make our NFL picks. But I think they beat the Bengals on Sunday. I think they do, but we'll see. Quick notes about the Jets. Obviously, they lose again on Sunday. They had a good win against Atlanta. That was a cool win for Tyrod Taylor. Like I said, he's such an easy guy to root for. He's a good dude. But then unfortunately, he gets hurt on Sunday against Miami. This poor guy just can't catch a break. It just seems like every time Tyrod gets a moment of glory, he suffers some sort of injury. You feel for him. It sucks. He's such a good dude and you root for him. Brady Cook came in. Justin Fields obviously was hurt. Brady Cook came in, played how you expect. Not very well, but again, the defense, again, that's my biggest takeaway from the game on Sunday with the Jets is their defense. My goodness, they continue not to tackle. The defense might have improved lately over the past few weeks, even ever since the trades of Quinnen Williams and Sauce Gardner, but they still have trouble tackling. And it's just really frustrating for 15 years watching this defense continue to struggle tackling. And of course, they were eliminated from playoff contention, they were eliminated from playoff contention the first 3 or 4 games into the season. But again, for the Jets, it's again evaluating the roster. They play the Jaguars this Sunday, and they're pretty good. Jacksonville, probably another loss. The Colts obviously have lost some games, so the Jets obviously are watching the Colts very closely and where their draft position will be next draft. But they have 2 first-round draft picks, obviously coming into next season, and they're going to need all those draft picks they're going to need. They're going to need all those draft picks and 5 or so draft picks to build this roster. And hopefully, again, Aaron Glenn, Darren Moogie can get it right. But Jets quarterback situation, again, is very murky. We'll find out in practice tomorrow how Tyrod Taylor's feeling, see if he plays on Sunday. But again, it's about just looking at the roster. John Mechie, I think, Jesus, my goodness, can you catch the football? I mean, A.D. Mitchell has played pretty well. Yeah, A.D. Mitchell has done pretty well. You're happy to see him play well. And you're also happy to see Isaiah Williams play well, too. Isaiah Williams looks like has turned himself into a good returner. He has turned his season around. A.D. Mitchell's played well. But Mechie, my goodness, another pair of drops on Sunday. It just stinks that you watch the game. It's like you're down 21-0 in the first quarter. The game's over. Like first quarter, 21-0, and Miami's just running all over you, wide open guys, not tackling, not getting after Tua. It's just frustrating. The Jets have not beaten Tua Tagovailoa. I did not know that. The Jets have not beaten Tua. I did not know that. And last year in the finale of the season, they beat Tyler Huntley. So I mean, the Jets have not beaten Tua Tagovailoa. I did not know that until on Sunday. But again, this is just where the Jets are again. And the good thing is they have a ton of top-heavy draft picks. They have a ton of top draft picks over the next 2 years. So we'll see what they do with them. They have the draft capital. And that trade for Sauce Gardner, 2 firsts and for A.D. Mitchell, looks pretty solid right now. Again, looks, that's right now. They still need to get those draft picks right. So, but we'll see who they play at quarterback on Sunday against a pretty darn good Jaguars team who's playing for a playoff spot and trying to win the division title. So that'll be it for today on MazzaOnSports. Let's just take a look to see before we wrap this show up. We'll be back on Friday. Didn't talk a lot of wrestling today. Too much going on around sports. Obviously, on Friday, we'll talk about Raw and SmackDown. And, of course, we'll talk about John Cena's last match on Saturday's night main event against, to no surprise, Gunther. It'll be John Cena versus Gunther on Saturday in Saturday's main event in Washington, D.C. in his last match. Also on the cards, Bayley and Sol Ruka. Oba Femi versus Cody Rhodes, which should be a very fun, interesting match, and see how they book that one for the finish. I'm going to guess Drew McIntyre interferes and either causes disqualification or costs Cody the match, and Oba gets the pinfall. What other match? Oh, this should be a good one. Tag title match between Javon Evans and Leon Slater. Again, Leon Slater against AJ Styles and Dragon Lee. That should be a lot of fun. I think that match will be the match of the night and be the best match on the card. And then, of course, Cena versus Gunther in the main event. But we'll see. But we'll talk more about that on Friday. What's going on around professional wrestling and John Cena's last match. And I guess I'll give you guys my personal memories of John Cena because I've been watching him since I watched his descent. Like I'm sure a lot of you watched his descent into greatness. I watched him in 2003 and 2004 develop the rapper gimmick that he had, the Dr. Thugonomics gimmick that he had. And he was the United States champion, right? And then he worked his way up, and then before you know it, he's the face of the company WWE champion in WrestleMania 21. So we'll talk more about that and give you guys my personal memories of John Cena, favorite feuds with him, and just what I think of him and where he is, not just in WWE, but where he is in all of professional wrestling. But that'll be more on Friday. So guys, it's like I said, let's do a little checkup on around the league, around sports before we see you guys on Friday. Obviously, the Colts, big news out of them. Phillip Rivers is back. Looks like he could very well start for them on Sunday. And, look at that. That's right, the draft lottery. The draft lottery for Major League Baseball. The Chicago White Sox have won the draft lottery. So congratulations to the White Sox. They will have the number 1 overall pick in the draft in Major League Baseball. So the White Sox have won the draft lottery and will have the number 1 pick in this upcoming draft. We'll see you guys on Friday. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I apologize for being away for a month. We'll hopefully make this show a little more often through the next coming weeks and months. So thank you. So just want to thank you guys for that. I apologize for not doing the show, being away for a month. So again, that'll be it for today on MazzaOnSports. Thank you guys so much for watching and tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. Have yourselves a great night, and we'll see you guys on Friday.